So Chad,
Yes.
let's talk about if maybe there's anybody out there right now that maybe is worried about foreclosure. Maybe they're worried they're going to miss a payment, or they're not going to be able to make a payment, or maybe they've missed one already.
Yeah.
Can we talk about and get some information, some reality around foreclosure, short sale, and what's going on?
You know, this one's on my mind a lot because 10 years ago, when we were in the middle of this crisis, we helped a lot of people in this situation, and we sold bank-owned homes, and we did a lot of short sales. And what I found is that most people they didn't have any idea what the reality was of their situation. And it was a huge blessing for me to be able to go in there and talk to them and explain what the realistic expectation is, because they had unrealistic fears that at any day, even by missing one payment or two payments, that the bank could come in, a sheriff would show up, and they'd kick them out of their house. And we're in some crazy times right now. We don't know what the future is going to be for our local and national economy. And we want to put out this video just to be able to set some clear expectations on what the rights are for people who have a home, who might be in a situation where I might not be able to make next month's payment, or I already didn't make the last two payments. What's going to happen? Because we see patterns in the way people respond to this, and sometimes there's a better way for them to do things, and that's why we want to do this video.
We can eliminate some fears.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things in foreclosure is fear. They give up because they just are fearful. So let's work through this.
And we always say, with good information, you can make good decisions. And a lot of times they don't have good information and they make bad decisions. Yeah. So we want to be informative and hopefully help a lot of people with this video.
So let's start out. What if I'm worried about, I haven't missed a payment, but I'm worried about whether I will? What would they be thinking about?
Okay. Well, the first thing they need to do is, go over your budget and see what can you do? Because once you start going down the path of missing a payment, and when you miss your house payment, usually that's the last payment you miss. And so at that point, there might not be another option. So it's good to communicate with your bank. There are options. If you have no other choice, because as soon as you miss that first payment, it's a significant ding on your credit. Okay, your credit will be damaged and it'll take a while to repair. The second payment as well, the third payment. But if you have no other choice, let's talk about what your options are. And one thing right now it's kind of dangerous because we don't know what the future is going to be, but the banks are offering a forbearance option.
That's right. And
that's where you can skip a payment and it adds that payment amount plus interest on top of your loan. And that one's kind of a scary one because we don't know how the market's going to be and how they're going to respond. None of these we recommend is like a good decision to do. These are like, if your only other option's foreclosure, that's something you want to look into. And communicate with your bank. They have loan modifications, things like that they might be able to do. So the first recommendation would be to call your bank, tell them your situation, and they want to know what's going on, because people think, the bank wants to get my house and make money, and they'll make a ton of money. Well, the banks don't make a lot of money on foreclosures. It's not a profitable part of their business. In the long run, they always lose. They don't want your house back. I know that for a fact. They do not want it back. So they'd rather work something out to where that doesn't happen.
And just like you're saying, is that there's not a one size fits all. Every one of us has a different financial picture and a different house and a different street and a different job. And the blanket statement that I'm doing X and I'm only doing X it's just not reality. And so when that fear creeps in, let us sit down with you and just consult on the different options, because there's 20 when you might think there's only one. And so let's get deep into some of this stuff with forbearance, short sale, and talk about the details of each of those.
And if you were to lose your house, what that process is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, in my opinion, could make better choices throughout that process. That's a better choice for them and a better choice for the bank.
So let's start at the top. So let's start about first of, what if I want to sell my house? If I'm behind on a payment, how does that work? And can I still sell?
Yeah, you totally can. because it's your home. A lot of people think if they miss a payment, suddenly they lose the home. No, it's a long process. But no, it's your home. And if you want to sell, that's the perfect time to call us. We can tell you what your home's worth. And more than likely, you have a considerable amount of equity.
That's right.
And just because you missed a payment or two does not mean that equity is not yours. It is 100% yours in every way possible. That is your equity and you deserve it, not an investor or a bank or something like that.
What about though if we don't have any equity?
Yeah.
What are the options?
Well, okay, so assuming you don't have the means to be
Let's
able
say
to...
I bought it 6 months ago and now I'm in trouble.
Yep. So assuming you don't have the means to make the payment, right? Because that's the only, if you have the means to make the payment, you want to make it work. But if you don't and you have to sell, then you want to be talking with a professional to find out what it's worth and how you can do that.
And not every real estate agent is a professional in this.
Well, foreclosure is a different industry. Short sales is a different industry. Just like commercial, it's a different industry. And yeah, this is complicated and it's a process. But if you don't have equity, then again, we want to be communicating with your bank. But if you have to sell and you don't have equity, I mean, again, like Jeremy said, one size doesn't fit all. Call us and we'll kind of walk through some different options. But the first step would be talking with your bank and communicating with that. A short sale is another option.
What's a short sale?
Okay, so a short sale is something where the bank, the purpose of this is for the bank, because they lose a lot of money on every single foreclosure. One, people move out of the house, so the lawn dies, the sprinklers might freeze up, the plumbing inside freezes up. You might have a flood. I mean, we've gone to houses where there's 10 feet of water in the basement, and it's just been like that all winter. And so it's not a good idea. Houses aren't meant to be empty. They're supposed to be lived in. And so the banks, in an attempt to decrease their loss, they are willing to work with the homeowner and say, hey, you live in the home, you maintain the payments, you keep the yard up, you keep it in nice condition, and what we'll do is we'll allow you to sell it. And then as long as it's market value, and as long as it's not a family member, and as long as you're not buying it back, then we will allow you to sell it. And the whole goal of this is for the bank to basically not come back on you on the deficiency. Because if you're selling it on a short sale, you owe so much and it's worth here, and there's a difference called the deficiency, and you don't want to have to pay that in 5 years or 10 years. So the whole goal is to try to negotiate that and have that forgiven. And that's the benefit of a short sale is you make it to where the bank doesn't have to foreclose and the house doesn't get vandalized or damaged. You continue in there. The bank has a loss, and they're willing to accept the loss for your trade. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the ultimate goal with a short sale. And a short sale, I mean, it's still negative on your credit. It'll impact you for years, but it's not as bad as a foreclosure. So it is an alternative to foreclosure.
And so it's really the bank, just like Chad's saying, they don't want the house back. They are a financial institution, not a homeowner institution. And so we can go to them with paperwork and say, look, here's the situation with the borrower. Here's the situation with the house. We can sell it short of what's owed to you. That's the short of the short sale. So if you owe $100,000 and it's only worth $80,000, they sometimes will accept that short of the total balance because they know that if they take it on and they have to deal with it, they may only net $60,000. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
Is it really in depth? Is there a lot of paperwork? Do you have to prove a lot of things?
Yeah, short sale is definitely not referring to the time frame to get it done. I mean, it's a long sale if you do it that way. But every bank's different. I mean, sometimes you can get it done in 60 days. A while ago, 10 years ago, it was 6 to 8 months to do a short sale. So it's not an easy process because there's a lot of things you have to prove. You have a hardship, so you have to, just like when you bought the home, you had to qualify to buy it. You have to also show all your, your financial situation and qualify to short sell it as well. And so yeah, every situation is different. And some banks don't forgive the difference either. And so we need to be aware of that.
Sometimes that deficiency judgment does come into play, and you have to sign a legal tax document that says, we gave you the difference, and it's a 1099 that sometimes you have to put included into your tax return that next year and pay tax on the short piece of it.
Yeah.
Banks are really difficult to work with, okay? And by working with them, you might think they don't care, they don't want to do this, because the person you're talking to probably doesn't totally understand it. And so you have to work with someone, and that's why you need a professional. I don't recommend that you do a short sale with anyone who's never done one, because the odds of them closing it is going to be pretty slim, in my experience. I mean, if you've closed 5 or 6 short sales, and you kind of have an idea of how that works. We were the leader in closing short sales from 2009 until 2014, when they kind of started going away. And I didn't just jump into short sales because I wanted to. I had friends that were listing their homes with other people, and they were trying to do a short sale, and they were not closing, and they would end up going into foreclosure. And I did not like that. And so because I saw a need there, that's when I started getting into short sales, because I know how banks work. I know we worked a lot with them on their bank-owned properties and foreclosure properties. So I know the process. I know the frustration you have to have. I know the patience you have to have. And so I'm like, I can do this. I know how, I have the skills to be able to make this happen. And so that's when I kind of went head first in an effort to help people who didn't have to lose their homes.
Right.
So let's talk about the next step then. So let's say a foreclosure or a short sale is not the option. The next step is I've missed quite a few payments. How many payments do you have to miss before that foreclosure process begins?
Yeah.
And then let's walk through the foreclosure process.
So it's an absolute legal process that there is statutes in place that require, the bank is required to file certain documents and to stay within certain time frames and parameters based on law. And the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to try to communicate with you. And if you communicate back, like Chad's saying, there are ways around the foreclosure. If you get to that point, and we're not attorneys, and so we're not giving legal advice right now. We just understand the time frames involved.
And we're sharing our experience of how we've seen the process go and what we understand it to be.
That's right. But the first thing that they're going to do if they proceed and set a date for a foreclosure sale is file at the county a notice of default. And that's a public notice that has to be recorded in the recorder's office. And from the date of that recording, there's certain advertisements of when that sale is going to happen, but the minimum is 120 days from that recording of that document.
How long does it take to get that notice until you're at the point of notice of default? Is it standardized or is it different for every bank?
It's different, but typically what we see is that the bank can't, if you miss one payment, the bank can't really do anything. If you, at least we've never seen them do that.
Besides charge you fees.
Besides charge you fees, yeah. The second one, I've never seen anybody do anything. The third one, sometimes, but usually it's around that 4th payment, they have the option to start the foreclosure process. And so basically from the time you miss that first payment until a foreclosure date, which is another 4 months roughly, you have about 8 months to be able to try to make it current. You know, that's why they give you that much time, because they don't want, in the state, that they don't want you to lose your house. They want to give you time. Right. They don't want to make it easy for the bank to take the property back, and the bank doesn't want to take the property back either. And so basically, yeah, you miss that first payment. There's some people I've seen that have been one payment behind for a year, but, there's nothing, that I can see that a bank's ever been able to do with that.
Yeah. A lot of people get frustrated and they're not opening that information. They're getting letters and they're not opening them. Yeah. And they're not communicating with their banks. And out of fear, or they're just frustrated, something's going on in their life that is frustrating, and they're ignoring this part because they're dealing with this part. But sometimes just helping and getting that clarity can maybe even save that foreclosure process by us helping you get to that reality and knowing that the bank doesn't want the house. Right. So what happens then?
Well, let me mention a couple of bad mistakes that I've seen people make. In my opinion, they're mistakes that I wish they wouldn't do. I've seen some people miss a payment or two, and then they feel ethically that they should not be entitled to their equity. And they I shouldn't live here if I'm not paying for it. And then they move out of the house. Well, one, I don't think that's right. I think it is your equity. Just because you're having a financial hardship doesn't mean you lose your equity. That is still your equity. So don't give up on your equity if you have equity, because a lot of people right now do. And then number two, moving out of the home early is not really good either. And people say, well, I feel bad. I mean, foreclosure is going to happen. I mean, I should not live here. Well, what happens is it's worse for you because you don't have a place to live and you're in a financial hardship. And two, it's way worse for the bank because that property is now abandoned and it can be vandalized. You know, you can have things freeze up. The yard always dies. And then the bank loses even more. And so it's in the best interest to actually stay there and take care of the property.
The bank wants you to stay in the house until they take it over if we're going through that.
As long as you're maintaining it, which usually most people do, maintain their home. And yeah, it's a win-win if people stay in the home throughout the process. And it's even better if you can call us and find out if you have equity, because so many people lose their homes when really they could sell it and walk away with 5 or 10 or 20 grand that they desperately need. And it's your money, you should get it.
That's right.
So once that notice of default has been filed, what happens then? So you've got a little behind the payments and the bank has decided to move forward on foreclosure. They file the notice of default at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Then what?
So the process at that point, they have certain requirements of advertisement, like we said, in a public notification, usually the newspaper. So the recording happens, then the newspaper or the advertisement for the sale happens. And then if you get to that date, they actually will hold an auction and people can come and bid on the property. And if no other parties come, the bank will always be the opening bid. And that will typically be your balance of the mortgage, interest accumulation, and any attorney's fees that have accrued because of the lack of payments.
So it's not generally just someone could come in and buy it at $80,000. The bank will bid to buy the house at what is owed for them.
Typically.
Because this is a legal process that has to be followed.
That's right.
Got it.
But they can determine what the bid is. So,
Right.
But yeah, usually it's high.
Okay.
And then once the property goes into foreclosure, say it goes to that point, then it is not your property anymore. That's through the bid and through that auction is how they take possession and legal ownership of your property. And so then at that point, we've been in the situation, Jeremy and I, many times where we've represented the bank to go to the homeowner. The bank's going to call us up and say, hey, you know, we want to know if this property is occupied or not, and we do what's called an occupancy check. And if the property's empty, then we're supposed to secure it, you know, rekey it, change the locks. If the property is still occupied, if you still live in the home, and we've done this many, many times, and it's a sensitive situation. I've never once though had someone be angry or combative in that situation. It's almost a relief when we show up because they've had so much stress and fear, and the closure's finally coming to where it's like, we just want to get out of this. And the bank typically will say, hey, we'll give you a certain amount of time, you know, a week or 10 days, and it's called cash for keys. You know, they're trying to be nice and they're trying to be accommodating, and they say, hey, we'll give you so much money if you'll have the property clean and empty in such and such amount of time. And usually that works out, and we set an expectation, and it's a cordial type event, and we go through that process. I've only, in many, many foreclosures that we've listed, I only had one person ever actually go to eviction, and it was a sad process. But that person, I went to their home so many times, and they just ignored every time. And that's when, I mean, just don't ignore. Just communicate, and this thing will be easier. And again, hopefully it never gets to that point because there's many options. But if it does, I mean, we're here to help and make it an easier process. And again, this video is just to help you understand the expectations of what's out there.
And most of what we're talking about here, we are not attorneys. And if you need legal advice, we would recommend you seek an attorney. But what we are discussing is the statutes associated with deeds of trust. A mortgage that's recorded on a property has a completely different time frame and process to actually transfer the title from you to the bank, and so we would recommend you talk to an attorney.
We're more here to give you support and guidance.
Yeah.
If you don't know what to do, we can say this is the time to go to an attorney. Now you need to talk to your accountant. Let's talk to your bank.
Great.
We can help you along that process to get to the right people for the situation.
Our involvement is to be kind of we're marketers. I mean, that's what we do, and we get involved in that process, either to market the home and help you avoid it, or to help. And so through that, we've had these experiences that not a lot of people have, And we would love for people to know how that works.
And if you're worried about it, if you're even worried you've lost your job and you haven't missed any payments, but maybe you just need to figure out a way to have a lower house payment. We are where you start.
Yeah.
Can we sell and get you into something before you get behind, into something smaller or a lower payment? Can we get you to a lender who can refinance that for you for a lower interest rate and get that payment down? Let us be here as a resource on any situation, what you're worried about with your home.
And the first thing I always ask is, do you want to stay or do you want to move? And we will give you a recommendation based upon what you have to do. We don't care if you sell or not. We just want to be able to help you, give good information so you can make good decisions. That's our goal on these types of phone calls.
Yeah. Maybe you've got equity and you just need to be into a smaller apartment or rent for a year while you're looking for a job. And maybe the equity pays off the bills and helps. All those things are available to you through communication. Yeah. And we'd love to, part of our motto is trust and communication leads to a great experience and success.
Yep.
And every meeting that we take is completely confidential. We don't share information. If you hire us as your representative and we are in a client-agent relationship, we help you as if we're helping ourselves, and we represent you as if it was our own house and our own money. So we want to help you have the options to know what the best move is for you at this time.
Give us a call.
Give us a call.
That's where it all starts.
Yep.
Call us and we're here for information and we'll direct you in what we know and what we can do to help.
It's a hard phone call, but it's worth it, and we will help you and do everything we can to help you understand your situation, because every situation is different. Yep. There's no blanket, this is what you do in this situation.
Yep. Call us today. If you don't know what you're doing or where you're going, man, it's sure nice to have an agent helping you. Call us today. We've got agents that'll match your personality perfectly.
If you want to know what your home is worth in today's market, give us a call.
If you're thinking about selling your home and you're thinking about doing for sale by owner, give us a call. We'd love to talk to you about how we can net you more money, even with paying a commission.